Most people think communication is about what you say, but here's the brutal truth: it's not. The words that come out of your mouth represent less than 10% of your actual influence. The other 90% is psychology strategy and understanding how the human brain processes information. This is why some people can walk into any room, command respect, and get exactly what they want, while others struggle to be taken seriously no matter how smart they are or how hard they work. You've probably noticed this phenomenon yourself. You know someone who isn't the smartest person in the room, but somehow everyone listens to them. They get promoted faster, close bigger deals, and seem to effortlessly influence others. Meanwhile, brilliant people with amazing ideas get ignored, overlooked, and underestimated. The difference isn't intelligence or luck, it's communication mastery. Here's what most people don't understand about powerful communication. It's not a talent you're born with, it's a skill you can learn. Every element of influential speaking, from the way you enter a conversation to how you structure your thoughts, to the psychological triggers you activate, can be systematically developed. The most persuasive speakers in the world, CEOs who command billion-dollar companies, negotiators who close impossible deals, leaders who inspire entire movements, they all follow specific psychological principles that you can master. This audiobook will teach you those principles. You'll learn how to read any room within seconds, how to structure your thoughts so people hang on every word, how to use strategic silence to create authority, how to handle disagreement without losing respect, and how to build the kind of magnetic presence that makes people want to listen to you. By the time you finish, you won't just speak differently, you'll think differently about every interaction you have. But here's the catch: this only works if you apply it. These aren't theoretical concepts to think about. These are practical strategies to use immediately. Every technique I share has been proven in real-world situations, from boardrooms to first dates, from job interviews to family dinners. The psychology of communication is universal, and once you understand it, you'll never struggle to be heard, respected, or influential again. Chapter 1. The fatal communication mistakes that kill your influence before you even speak. Most people sabotage their influence before they even open their mouth. They walk into conversations already defeated because they've made fundamental mistakes that signal weakness, insecurity, and low status to everyone around them. These mistakes are so common that 95% of people make them without even realizing it. And they're destroying their ability to be taken seriously. The first fatal mistake is reactive communication. Most people wait for others to start conversations, set the tone, and determine the direction of the discussion. They respond instead of leading. They follow instead of guiding. And they let other people control the frame of every interaction. This immediately positions them as followers, not leaders. When you're constantly reacting, you're giving away your power and training others to see you as someone who waits for permission rather than someone who takes charge. Reactive communicators use phrases like, "I think maybe you're probably right," and "I'm not sure," but they ask permission to speak, they apologize for having opinions, and they constantly seek validation from others. This creates a psychological dynamic where people unconsciously categorize them as less important, less confident, and less worthy of serious attention. The human brain is wired to respect certainty and authority, and reactive communication signals the opposite. The second fatal mistake is information dumping. Most people think that more information equals more persuasion, so they overwhelm others with facts, details, statistics, and explanations. They believe that if they just provide enough evidence, people will naturally agree with them. This is completely backwards. The human brain doesn't process information logically, it processes it emotionally first, then finds logical reasons to support those emotions. When you dump information on people, you're actually making it harder for them to understand and agree with you. You're creating cognitive overload, which triggers mental resistance. Instead of being persuaded, people become overwhelmed, confused, and mentally exhausted. They stop listening not because your information is wrong, but because their brain can't process it effectively. Information dumping also signals that you don't understand your audience's needs, priorities, or attention span. The third fatal mistake is emotional leakage. This happens when your internal emotional state unconsciously affects your communication. If you're nervous, anxious, insecure, or desperate, these emotions leak out through your voice tone, body language, and word choice, even when you're trying to hide them. People can sense emotional leakage immediately, and it destroys your credibility. Emotional leakage shows up in subtle ways. Your voice might get slightly higher when you're nervous. You might speak faster when you're anxious. You might use more filler words when you're uncertain. You might lean forward too much when you're desperate for approval. These micro-signals communicate more than your actual words, and they tell people that you're not in control of yourself. If you can't control your own emotions, how can you be trusted with important decisions or responsibilities? The fourth fatal mistake is mirror communication. This is when you unconsciously copy the communication style, energy level, and opinions of whoever you're talking to. Mirror communicators become chameleons, constantly adjusting their personality to match their environment. They think this makes them more likable, but it actually makes them forgettable and untrustworthy. When you mirror others, you lose your unique voice and perspective. People can sense that you're not being authentic, and they stop taking you seriously. Mirror communication also prevents you from adding real value to conversations because you're just echoing what others have already said. Instead of being seen as agreeable, you're seen as weak, indecisive, and lacking in personal conviction. The fifth fatal mistake is defensive communication. This happens when you interpret neutral questions or comments as personal attacks and respond defensively. Defensive communicators are constantly explaining themselves, justifying their actions, and protecting their ego. They turn normal conversations into battles and exhaust people with their need to be right. Defensive communication creates a negative spiral. When you get defensive, others become more aggressive, which makes you even more defensive. This pattern destroys relationships, erodes trust, and makes people avoid communicating with you altogether. It also signals that you're insecure about your competence or authority, which undermines your influence. The sixth fatal mistake is approval-seeking communication. This is when your primary goal in every conversation is to be liked rather than to be respected or effective. Approval seekers constantly monitor other people's reactions and adjust their message based on what they think others want to hear. They avoid disagreement, sacrifice their opinions, and prioritize harmony over truth. Approval-seeking communication might seem nice, but it's actually manipulative and weak. When people sense that you're more concerned with being liked than being honest, they lose respect for you. They also stop trusting your opinions because they know you'll tell them what they want to hear rather than what they need to hear. This makes you irrelevant in important conversations and decisions. The seventh fatal mistake is unconscious communication. Most people have never studied how communication actually works, so they wing it and hope for the best. They don't understand how their tone affects perception, how their word choice creates meaning, or how their body language influences outcomes. This is like trying to perform surgery without understanding anatomy. You might get lucky, but you'll probably cause damage. Unconscious communicators repeat the same mistakes over and over because they don't know what they're doing wrong. They blame others for misunderstanding them instead of taking responsibility for unclear communication. They get frustrated when people don't respond the way they want, but they never examine their own role in creating those outcomes. These 7 fatal mistakes are epidemic in modern society, and they're the reason why most people struggle with influence, authority, and respect. The good news is that once you become aware of these patterns, you can start changing them immediately. Every conversation becomes an opportunity to practice conscious, strategic communication that builds your influence instead of destroying it. Chapter 2. The Neuroscience of First Impressions: Why People Decide About You in 3 Seconds. Your brain makes snap judgments about other people in less than 3 seconds. And those judgments are incredibly difficult to change. This isn't a flaw in human psychology, it's a survival mechanism that evolved over millions of years to help us quickly identify threats, allies, and opportunities. Understanding how these first impressions work gives you enormous power because you can consciously influence them instead of leaving them to chance. The human brain processes first impressions through multiple channels simultaneously. Your appearance, posture, facial expressions, voice, tone, energy level, and initial words all get processed instantly and unconsciously. Within 3 seconds, people have already decided whether you're competent, confident, trustworthy, high status, or low status, and these decisions shape every subsequent interaction you have with them. This happens because of something called thin slice judgments. The brain takes a tiny slice of information and uses it to make broad predictions about your character, abilities, and intentions. These predictions are remarkably accurate for basic personality traits, but they're also heavily influenced by unconscious biases and social conditioning. This means you can trigger positive first impressions by understanding what signals the brain is looking for. The first element of powerful first impressions is physical presence. Before you say a single word, people are evaluating your posture, movement, and spatial awareness. Confident people take up appropriate space, move with purpose, and maintain steady, controlled movements. They don't fidget, rush, or make themselves smaller. Their physical presence communicates that they belong in the space and have every right to be there. Physical presence starts with your posture. Stand or sit with your spine straight, shoulders back, and head level. This isn't about being rigid, it's about being aligned and grounded. When your posture is strong and stable, it triggers unconscious associations with competence, leadership, and emotional control. When your posture is weak, collapsed, or fidgety, it signals insecurity, nervousness, and low confidence. Your movement patterns also communicate volumes about your internal state. Confident people move deliberately and smoothly. They don't rush unless there's a real urgency, and they don't move slowly unless they're being intentional about creating a specific effect. Their movements have purpose, direction, and control, which signals that they have control over themselves and their environment. The second element is facial expression and eye contact. Your face is the most expressive part of your body, and people read it constantly for emotional information. Confident communicators maintain relaxed, alert facial expressions that show they're engaged but not overly eager. They make appropriate eye contact that shows interest and attention without being aggressive or invasive. Eye contact patterns are particularly important for establishing authority and connection. Strong eye contact signals confidence, honesty, and engagement, but too much becomes aggressive and uncomfortable. The optimal pattern is to maintain eye contact for 3 to 5 second intervals while speaking and 4 to 6 second intervals while listening. This creates a sense of connection without triggering discomfort or dominance battles. Your facial expressions should match your internal emotional state and your intended message. If you're nervous but trying to appear confident, the mismatch will be obvious and undermine your credibility. This is why emotional regulation is so crucial for powerful communication. You need to genuinely feel calm and confident, not just try to fake it. The third element is vocal quality and tone. Your voice carries enormous amounts of information about your emotional state, confidence level, and social status. Within seconds of hearing you speak, people make judgments about your competence, authority, and trustworthiness based purely on how you sound. Confident voices have certain characteristics. They're well supported by breath, which creates a full, rich tone. They have controlled pace, which shows thoughtfulness and intentionality. They have appropriate volume, which demonstrates awareness of the space and audience. They have clear articulation, which signals education and attention to detail. And they have varied intonation, which keeps people engaged and interested. Many people unconsciously sabotage their vocal authority by speaking too quietly, which signals insecurity, speaking too quickly, which signals nervousness, or using uptalk, which makes statements sound like questions. These vocal patterns immediately lower your perceived status and competence, regardless of what you're actually saying. The fourth element is your opening words and energy. The first thing you say sets the tone for the entire conversation, and people remember it disproportionately due to the primacy effect. Confident communicators open with clear, purposeful statements that establish their authority and set the direction for the discussion. Weak openings include apologizing for speaking, interrupting, or taking up time. They include uncertain phrases like, "I'm not sure if this is right," but, or, "I hope you don't mind me saying." They include excessive pleasantries or small talk that wastes time and dilutes your message. These patterns immediately signal that you don't value your own time or opinions, which trains others to devalue them as well. Strong openings are direct, purposeful, and confident. They might include a clear statement of your purpose, an interesting observation that demonstrates insight, or a strategic question that engages the other person's thinking. The key is to lead the conversation from the first moment, rather than waiting for others to set the direction. The fifth element is emotional congruence. This means that your words, emotions, and body language all align and support the same message. When there's incongruence between these channels, people unconsciously sense that something is off, and they become less trusting and less engaged. Emotional congruence requires genuine confidence and emotional regulation. You can't fake it effectively because micro-expressions, body language, and vocal qualities leak your true emotional state. This is why developing real confidence and emotional control is so much more effective than trying to use superficial techniques to appear confident. The neuroscience of first impressions reveals that people are constantly evaluating you on multiple levels simultaneously. They're assessing your competence, your confidence, your trustworthiness, your status, and your intentions, all within the first few seconds of meeting you. By understanding how these assessments work, you can consciously influence them and create powerful, positive first impressions that open doors and create opportunities. Chapter 3. The Authority Matrix. How to command respect without being aggressive. Most people think authority comes from being loud, aggressive, or dominating, but real authority is the opposite. True authority is calm, controlled, and magnetic. It draws people in rather than pushing them away, and it creates respect rather than fear or resentment. Understanding the difference between authority and aggression is crucial because one builds your influence while the other destroys it. Authority is based on competence, confidence, and emotional control. When you have genuine authority, people naturally defer to your judgment, seek your opinions, and follow your lead. This happens because authority triggers unconscious respect and trust. People feel safe around authoritative individuals because they sense that these people have control over themselves and their environment. Aggression, on the other hand, is based on force, intimidation, and emotional reactivity. Aggressive people might get temporary compliance, but they don't get genuine respect or willing cooperation. Aggression actually signals weakness because it shows that you need to use force to get what you want, rather than earning it through competence and character. The first element of natural authority is emotional regulation. Authoritative people remain calm and controlled, even in stressful situations. They don't get defensive, angry, or flustered when challenged. This emotional stability signals strength, competence, and leadership capability. When others see that you can maintain your composure under pressure, they naturally view you as someone who can handle responsibility and make good decisions. Emotional regulation doesn't mean being emotionless or robotic. It means being able to choose your emotional responses rather than being controlled by them. Authoritative people feel emotions, but they process them internally before responding. This allows them to respond strategically rather than reactively, which leads to better outcomes and increased respect. The second element is intellectual confidence. This means having well-thought-out opinions based on solid reasoning and being able to articulate them clearly and persuasively. Intellectual confidence shows up in how you present ideas, defend positions, and engage with opposing viewpoints. You're not afraid of intellectual challenges because you've done the work to develop informed perspectives. Intellectual confidence is different from arrogance. Arrogant people think they know everything and dismiss other viewpoints without consideration. Intellectually confident people know what they know and acknowledge what they don't know. They're open to learning and changing their minds when presented with better information, but they don't waver on principles they've carefully considered. The third element is purposeful communication. Authoritative people communicate with clear intention behind every word. They don't speak just to fill silence or to be polite. When they contribute to conversations, they add genuine value through insights, questions, or information that moves the discussion forward. This purposefulness makes others pay attention because they know that when you speak, it's worth listening to. Purposeful communication also means being selective about when you speak. Authoritative people don't feel compelled to comment on everything or to prove their intelligence in every conversation. They speak when they have something meaningful to contribute and remain silent when they don't. This selectivity makes their words carry more weight when they do choose to speak. The fourth element is boundary setting. Authority requires clear boundaries about what you will and won't accept in terms of behavior, treatment, and communication. These boundaries aren't aggressive or punitive. They're simply clear statements about your standards and expectations. When people know where your boundaries are, they're more likely to respect them and you. Setting boundaries effectively requires calm consistency. You don't need to get angry or aggressive to enforce boundaries. You just need to be clear about consequences and follow through consistently. When someone crosses a boundary, you address it directly and matter-of-factly, without drama or emotional escalation. This shows that you take yourself seriously and expect others to do the same. The fifth element is competence demonstration. Real authority is ultimately based on proven ability to get results. People respect you when they see evidence that you know what you're doing and can deliver on your promises. This competence can be demonstrated through past achievements, current performance, or clear expertise in relevant areas. Competence demonstration isn't about bragging or showing off. It's about quietly and consistently proving your value through your actions and results. When people see that you consistently deliver high-quality work, meet deadlines, solve problems, and add value, they naturally begin to defer to your judgment and seek your input. The sixth element is strategic vulnerability. This might seem counterintuitive, but showing appropriate vulnerability actually strengthens authority rather than weakening it. Strategic vulnerability means being honest about limitations, acknowledging mistakes, and asking for help when needed. This shows confidence and emotional maturity rather than weakness. The key is that the vulnerability must be strategic and appropriate. Sharing every insecurity, doubt, or personal problem undermines authority, but acknowledging specific limitations or mistakes while taking responsibility for them actually increases trust and respect. It shows that you're honest, self-aware, and focused on results rather than protecting your ego. The seventh element is social calibration. Authoritative people understand social dynamics and adjust their communication style to fit the situation without compromising their core principles. They know when to be more formal or casual, when to be direct or diplomatic, when to lead or support. This social intelligence allows them to maintain authority across different contexts and relationships. Social calibration requires observing and understanding the unspoken rules of different social environments. What works in a boardroom might not work at a family dinner. What's appropriate with peers might not be appropriate with subordinates or superiors. Authoritative people navigate these differences skillfully, while maintaining their authentic personality and values. Authority is not about dominating others or getting your way through force. It's about earning respect through competence, character, and emotional maturity. When you develop genuine authority, people naturally want to follow your lead, seek your advice, and respect your decisions. This creates influence that lasts and relationships that strengthen over time rather than deteriorating due to resentment or fear. Chapter 4. The Persuasion Operating System. How to change minds without manipulation. Persuasion is not manipulation. Manipulation involves deceiving or coercing people to act against their best interests for your benefit. Persuasion involves helping people make decisions that are genuinely good for them, while also achieving your legitimate objectives. Understanding this distinction is crucial because ethical persuasion creates lasting relationships and results, while manipulation destroys trust and backfires over time. The foundation of ethical persuasion is understanding how people actually make decisions. Most people think decision-making is a logical, rational process, but neuroscience reveals that it's primarily emotional. People make decisions based on feelings, then use logic to justify those decisions to themselves and others. This means that effective persuasion must engage emotions first, then provide logical support for the emotional decision. This doesn't mean manipulating emotions or creating false feelings. It means understanding what people genuinely care about and helping them see how your proposal connects to their real values, priorities, and desires. When persuasion aligns with someone's authentic interests and emotions, it feels natural and beneficial rather than pushy or manipulative. The first principle of the persuasion operating system is identifying the other person's core motivations. Everyone has primary drivers that guide their decisions. These might include security, achievement recognition, autonomy, connection, growth, or contribution. Before attempting to persuade someone, you need to understand what really motivates them, not what you think should motivate them. You can identify motivations through careful observation and strategic questions. What topics make them light up with enthusiasm? What concerns keep them awake at night? What achievements are they most proud of? What fears do they try to avoid? What values do they consistently defend? Understanding these deeper motivations allows you to frame your proposals in ways that genuinely resonate with their priorities. The second principle is establishing genuine rapport and trust. People are only persuaded by people they like, trust, and respect. This rapport can't be faked through superficial techniques like mirroring body language or using someone's name repeatedly. Real rapport comes from authentic interest in the other person, demonstrated competence, and consistent reliability. Building rapport requires shifting your focus from what you want to get to what you can give. When you genuinely care about helping someone solve their problems or achieve their goals, they sense this authenticity and become more open to your influence. This doesn't mean being selfless. It means finding genuine alignment between your interests and theirs. The third principle is strategic storytelling. Facts tell, but stories sell. Because stories engage emotions, create vivid mental pictures, and make abstract concepts concrete and memorable. Instead of presenting dry information or logical arguments, you embed your key points in compelling narratives that help people visualize and feel the benefits of your proposal. Effective persuasion stories have specific elements. They feature relatable characters facing similar challenges to your audience. They include specific sensory details that make the story vivid and memorable. They show clear cause and effect relationships between actions and outcomes. They end with results that your audience wants to achieve. And they position your proposal as the key factor that enabled the positive outcome. The fourth principle is addressing resistance proactively. Every person has reasons for potentially saying no to your proposal, and ignoring these concerns doesn't make them go away. Skilled persuaders identify likely objections and address them before they're raised. This shows that you understand the other person's perspective and have thoughtfully considered their concerns. Addressing resistance isn't about overpowering objections with stronger arguments. It's about acknowledging legitimate concerns and providing genuine solutions or alternatives. Sometimes this means modifying your proposal to better meet their needs. Sometimes it means providing additional information or assurances. Sometimes it means accepting that your proposal isn't right for them at this time. The fifth principle is creating urgency without pressure. People postpone decisions when there's no compelling reason to act now. Effective persuasion includes legitimate reasons why acting sooner is better than acting later. This might include limited availability, time-sensitive opportunities, or increasing costs or difficulties over time. The key is that the urgency must be real, not artificial. Creating false deadlines or scarcity backfires when people discover the deception. But highlighting genuine time-sensitive factors helps people overcome natural procrastination and indecision. You're not pressuring them, you're helping them avoid the negative consequences of unnecessary delay. The sixth principle is making it easy to say yes. Even when people want to accept your proposal, they might hesitate if the process seems complicated, risky, or overwhelming. Effective persuasion removes as many barriers as possible and makes the next step clear, simple, and low risk. This might involve breaking a large commitment into smaller steps, providing guarantees or trial periods, reducing upfront costs, or handling administrative details yourself. The easier you make it for people to move forward, the more likely they are to do so, even when they're genuinely interested in your proposal. The seventh principle is confirming commitment and next steps. Many persuasion attempts fail not because people aren't convinced, but because the conversation ends without clear agreement about what happens next. Once someone agrees to your proposal, you need to confirm their commitment and establish specific next steps with timelines and responsibilities. This confirmation serves multiple purposes. It ensures that you both understand what was agreed to. It creates psychological commitment through the consistency principle. It prevents the agreement from being forgotten or deprioritized. And it maintains momentum by establishing immediate action steps rather than leaving everything for later. The Persuasion operating system works because it aligns with how people naturally think, feel, and make decisions. It doesn't try to override their judgment or manipulate their emotions. Instead, it helps them make good decisions by providing relevant information, addressing legitimate concerns, and making it easy to take action that serves their interests, while also achieving your objectives. Chapter 5. Strategic Silence. The power of what you don't say. Most people are afraid of silence in conversations. They feel compelled to fill every pause with words, even when they have nothing meaningful to say. This fear of silence destroys their communication power because it makes them appear nervous, anxious, and lacking in confidence. Learning to use silence strategically is one of the most powerful communication skills you can develop. Silence is not the absence of communication, it's a different form of communication. Strategic silence can convey confidence, authority, thoughtfulness, and control. It can create space for others to reveal important information. It can add weight and impact to your words. It can diffuse tension and create connection. And it can give you time to think before responding, instead of reacting impulsively. The first type of strategic silence is the confidence pause. This is a brief silence before you speak that shows you're choosing your words carefully rather than blurting out the first thing that comes to mind. Confident people are comfortable with this pause because they're not desperate to prove themselves or fill every moment with chatter. The confidence pause works because it signals thoughtfulness and intentionality. When you pause before speaking, people unconsciously assume that what you're about to say is worth waiting for. This makes them pay closer attention to your words and gives your message more impact. It also gives you time to organize your thoughts and choose the most effective way to communicate your point. The second type is the emphasis pause. This is a strategic silence after making an important point that allows it to sink in before moving on. Most people rush from point to point without giving their audience time to process important information. The emphasis pause ensures that your key messages are absorbed and remembered rather than lost in a stream of continuous talking. Emphasis pauses are particularly powerful after making bold statements, asking important questions, or delivering surprising information. The silence creates mental space for the other person to consider what you've said, rather than immediately thinking about their response. This increases the likelihood that your message will influence their thinking and decision-making. The third type is the invitation silence. This is a longer pause that creates space for the other person to contribute to the conversation. Many people monopolize conversations by talking continuously, which prevents them from learning important information about the other person's thoughts, feelings, and motivations. Invitation silences encourage others to share more than they initially intended. Invitation silences work because most people feel compelled to fill conversational gaps. When you create space through silence, others will often reveal information they wouldn't share if you kept talking. This information can be invaluable for understanding their perspectives, building rapport, and identifying opportunities for connection or persuasion. The fourth type is the processing pause. This is a silence that gives you time to think before responding to difficult questions or challenging statements. Instead of feeling pressured to respond immediately, you can take a moment to consider your options and choose the most strategic response. This prevents you from saying something you'll regret and helps you maintain control of the conversation. Processing pauses are especially important when dealing with confrontation, criticism, or high-pressure situations. The natural tendency is to defend yourself immediately, but this often leads to reactive responses that escalate conflict or undermine your position. A strategic pause allows you to respond thoughtfully rather than emotionally, which leads to better outcomes. The fifth type is the tension pause. This is a silence that allows uncomfortable emotions or difficult topics to exist without immediately trying to fix them or move past them. Many people are so uncomfortable with tension that they rush to resolve it even when sitting with the discomfort would be more productive. Tension pauses can be powerful in negotiations, difficult conversations, or when addressing performance issues. Instead of immediately offering solutions or reassurances, you allow the other person to feel the full weight of the situation. This often motivates them to take responsibility or propose solutions themselves rather than waiting for you to fix their problems. The sixth type is the reflection silence. This is a pause that gives both parties time to consider what has been discussed before moving to the next topic or making decisions. Reflection silences prevent rushed decisions and ensure that important conversations receive adequate consideration. Reflection silences are particularly valuable at the end of important discussions or before making significant commitments. They allow everyone involved to mentally review what has been covered, identify any remaining questions or concerns, and confirm their understanding before proceeding. Using silence effectively requires overcoming your discomfort with conversational gaps. Most people find silence awkward because they interpret it as a sign that the conversation isn't going well. But strategic silence actually improves conversation quality by creating space for deeper thinking, more genuine sharing, and more thoughtful responses. The key to comfortable silence is shifting your mindset from feeling responsible for constant entertainment to being confident in your presence. You don't need to fill every moment with words to add value to a conversation. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can contribute is attentive listening and thoughtful pauses that encourage others to share more deeply. Practicing strategic silence also requires paying attention to your own emotional state. If you're anxious, nervous, or insecure, you'll feel more pressure to fill silence with chatter. But if you're calm, confident, and centered, you'll be comfortable with conversational pauses and able to use them strategically. The power of silence lies in its rarity. In a world where most people talk too much and listen too little, those who master strategic silence stand out as unusually thoughtful, confident, and compelling communicators. They're remembered not just for what they say, but for how they make others feel heard, understood, and respected through their attentive listening and strategic pauses. Chapter 6. The Social Calibration Code, Reading Rooms, and Adapting Your Communication Style. The most sophisticated communicators possess an almost supernatural ability to read social situations and adapt their communication style accordingly. They seem to know exactly what to say, how to say it, and when to remain silent in any environment. This isn't magic or natural talent. It's a learnable skill called social calibration. And it's the difference between being effective in one context versus being powerful in every context. Social calibration is the ability to accurately assess the unwritten rules of any social environment and adjust your communication to work within those rules while still achieving your objectives. Every social situation has invisible dynamics, power structures, cultural norms, and emotional undercurrents that determine what kind of communication will be effective and what will backfire. Most people fail at social calibration because they use the same communication approach in every situation. They speak to their boss the same way they speak to their friends. They use the same tone in formal meetings that they use in casual conversations. They apply the same strategies in high-tension situations that they use in relaxed environments. This lack of adaptation severely limits their influence and often creates unnecessary conflict or resistance. The first element of social calibration is situational awareness. Before you open your mouth, you need to assess the environment you're entering. What is the formal hierarchy, and who holds decision-making power? What is the emotional climate? And are people stressed, relaxed, anxious, or excited? What are the cultural norms, and what behaviors are expected versus prohibited? What is the time pressure, and how much depth versus efficiency is required? Situational awareness requires observing multiple channels simultaneously. You're reading body language, listening to tone patterns, noting who speaks and who remains silent, watching how people position themselves physically, and identifying who others defer to or seek approval from. This information tells you how to position yourself and what communication style will be most effective. The second element is audience analysis. Different people respond to different types of communication, and effective calibration requires understanding your specific audience. Are they analytical people who want facts and logic, or relational people who want connection and emotion? Are they detail-oriented people who need comprehensive information, or big-picture people who want summary and vision? Are they risk-averse people who need reassurance, or risk-tolerant people who respond to bold proposals? You can assess audience preferences through several indicators. Their professional background often predicts their communication preferences. Engineers and analysts typically prefer logical, structured presentations, while sales and marketing people often respond better to emotional storytelling. Their questions reveal whether they think in details or concepts, whether they focus on problems or opportunities, whether they prioritize safety or growth. The third element is power dynamics assessment. Every social situation has formal and informal power structures that determine how influence flows. Formal power comes from titles, positions, and official authority. Informal power comes from relationships, expertise, social status, and personal charisma. Effective communication requires understanding both types of power and adapting your approach accordingly. When communicating with people who have higher formal power, you typically need to be more structured, respectful, and results-focused. You should prepare thoroughly present information clearly and respect their time constraints. When communicating with people who have informal power, you might need to be more relational, collaborative, and patient in building consensus. Understanding power dynamics also helps you avoid accidentally threatening or undermining powerful people. Some communication styles that work well with peers can backfire with superiors if they seem disrespectful or presumptuous. Other styles that work with subordinates can appear weak or indecisive with peers or superiors. The fourth element is cultural competence. Every organization, industry, and social group has unique cultural norms that affect communication effectiveness. These cultures determine what topics are safe versus dangerous, what communication styles are respected versus rejected, and what behaviors signal competence versus incompetence. Corporate cultures vary dramatically in their communication preferences. Some value direct confrontational debate, while others prioritize harmony and consensus. Some reward bold risk-taking, while others punish any deviation from established procedures. Some encourage informal, casual interaction, while others maintain strict professional boundaries. Misreading these cultural signals can destroy your credibility and influence. Cultural competence requires observing how successful people in that environment communicate and modeling their effective patterns while avoiding their mistakes. You're looking for the unwritten rules that determine who gets promoted, who gets listened to, and who gets marginalized based on their communication style. The fifth element is emotional intelligence calibration. Every social situation has an emotional tone that affects how people receive and process communication. High-stress environments require different approaches than relaxed environments. Celebratory situations call for different energy than problem-solving situations. Crisis moments demand different strategies than routine interactions. Emotional calibration means matching your energy and tone to the situational requirements while still maintaining your authentic personality. If everyone is stressed and urgent, you can't be slow and casual without appearing disconnected. If everyone is formal and serious, you can't be playful and irreverent without seeming inappropriate. But you also can't completely suppress your personality, or you'll appear fake and untrustworthy. The sixth element is strategic flexibility. Social calibration isn't about becoming a chameleon who has no consistent identity. It's about being strategically flexible in your communication approach while maintaining your core values and objectives. You're adapting your methods, not your principles, your style, not your substance, your presentation, not your purpose. Strategic flexibility requires having multiple communication approaches in your repertoire. You need to be able to communicate analytically when the situation requires logic emotionally, when connection is needed assertively, when leadership is required, and collaboratively when consensus building is important. This range allows you to be effective across diverse situations and relationships. The seventh element is real-time adjustment. Social calibration isn't just about reading a situation correctly at the beginning, it's about continuously monitoring feedback and adjusting your approach as the situation evolves. People's moods change, power dynamics shift, and new information emerges that requires communication strategy modifications. Real-time adjustment requires paying attention to micro-feedback signals. Are people leaning in or leaning back? Are they asking questions or remaining silent? Are they making eye contact or looking away? Are they nodding in agreement or showing signs of confusion or disagreement? This feedback tells you whether your current approach is working or needs modification. Effective real-time adjustment also requires having the emotional flexibility to change course without losing confidence or composure. Many people get locked into communication approaches even when they're clearly not working because changing feels like admitting failure. But strategic adaptation is a sign of social intelligence, not weakness. Mastering social calibration transforms you from someone who is effective in limited contexts to someone who can succeed in any environment. You become the person others rely on for important conversations, difficult negotiations, and high-stakes presentations, because you have the rare ability to read situations accurately and communicate in ways that achieve results while maintaining relationships. Chapter 7. The Confidence Algorithm Building Unshakable Self-Assurance in any situation. Confidence is not a personality trait you're born with. It's a skill you can systematically develop. Most people think confidence comes from success, but the reality is reversed. Confidence creates success, not the other way around. When you understand how confidence actually works, you can build it deliberately and maintain it consistently, regardless of external circumstances. The foundation of unshakable confidence is understanding the difference between outcome-based confidence and process-based outcome-based confidence. Outcome-based confidence depends on external results and other people's approval. When things go well, you feel confident. When they don't, you feel insecure. This type of confidence is fragile and unreliable because you can't control outcomes or other people's reactions. Process-based confidence comes from trusting your ability to handle whatever happens. It's based on your preparation, competence, and emotional resilience rather than specific results. When you have process-based confidence, you remain steady and self-assured even when outcomes are uncertain or disappointing, because you know you have the skills and character to navigate any situation effectively. The first element of the confidence algorithm is competence building. Real confidence is rooted in real ability, and you can't fake competence for very long without being exposed. This means that building confidence requires continuously developing your knowledge, skills, and expertise in areas that matter to your goals and responsibilities. Competence building isn't just about technical skills. It also includes communication skills, emotional regulation, leadership abilities, problem-solving capabilities, and social intelligence. The broader your competence base, the more confident you can be in diverse situations because you know you have the tools to add value and achieve results. The key to competence building is deliberate practice focused on your specific weaknesses and challenges. Most people practice what they're already good at because it feels comfortable and rewarding. But confidence comes from knowing you can handle difficult situations, which requires practicing the skills you'll need when things go wrong. The second element is preparation mastery. Confidence grows when you know you've prepared thoroughly for whatever challenges you might face. This preparation includes researching relevant information, anticipating potential problems, developing contingency plans, and rehearsing important communications or presentations. Preparation mastery goes beyond surface-level planning to include mental and emotional preparation. You visualize successful outcomes, but also prepare mentally for potential setbacks or difficulties. You practice staying calm and focused under pressure. You develop quick decision-making processes for unexpected situations. This comprehensive preparation gives you confidence that you can handle anything that comes up. The third element is evidence accumulation. Your brain builds confidence by accumulating evidence that you can succeed in challenging situations. Every time you handle a difficult conversation, navigate a complex problem, or achieve a meaningful goal, you add to your evidence bank of personal competence. Most people don't pay attention to their successes and accomplishments, so they don't get the confidence benefits from their achievements. They focus on failures and problems while dismissing or minimizing their successes. Building confidence requires deliberately noting and remembering evidence of your capabilities and achievements. You can accelerate evidence accumulation by setting progressive challenges that stretch your abilities without overwhelming them. Start with situations that are slightly outside your comfort zone and gradually increase the difficulty as your confidence grows. Each success builds evidence that you can handle increasingly challenging situations. The fourth element is self-talk optimization. Your internal dialogue has enormous impact on your confidence levels because your brain believes what you tell it repeatedly. Most people have negative self-talk patterns that undermine their confidence through constant self-criticism, doubt, and catastrophic thinking. Optimizing self-talk doesn't mean unrealistic positive thinking or denying genuine challenges. It means developing accurate, realistic self-assessment that acknowledges both your strengths and areas for improvement without being unnecessarily harsh or defeatist. You speak to yourself the way you would speak to a valued colleague, objective, supportive, and constructive. Effective self-talk focuses on process rather than outcome, on effort rather than ability, and on learning rather than proving. Instead of telling yourself you have to be perfect, you remind yourself that you're capable of handling challenges and learning from mistakes. Instead of fearing failure, you frame difficulties as opportunities to demonstrate resilience and problem-solving skills. The fifth element is posture and physiology management. Your physical state directly affects your emotional and mental state through the mind-body connection. When you maintain confident posture, move with purpose, and control your breathing, you actually feel more confident, not just appear more confident. Confident physiology includes standing or sitting with proper alignment, moving deliberately rather than frantically making appropriate eye contact, and using controlled gestures that support your communication. These physical practices don't just project confidence to others, they generate genuine feelings of confidence within yourself. Breathing patterns are particularly important for confidence management. Shallow, rapid breathing triggers anxiety and nervousness, while deep, controlled breathing promotes calm confidence. Learning to regulate your breathing gives you a powerful tool for managing your emotional state in any situation. The sixth element is comfort zone expansion. Confidence grows through experience with challenging situations, and you can't build that experience by staying in your comfort zone. This requires deliberately seeking out situations that stretch your abilities and force you to develop new skills and capabilities. Comfort zone expansion should be systematic and progressive, rather than reckless and overwhelming. You want to challenge yourself enough to grow, but not so much that you become overwhelmed and lose confidence. The goal is to gradually expand your comfort zone so that situations that once seemed impossible become routine. Each time you successfully navigate a situation outside your previous comfort zone, you expand your confidence for similar situations in the future. Over time, this process builds deep, unshakable confidence because you have extensive evidence that you can adapt and succeed in diverse, challenging circumstances. The seventh element is identity alignment. The most powerful confidence comes from alignment between your actions and your authentic identity. When you're trying to be someone you're not or acting in ways that contradict your values, you feel insecure and uncertain regardless of your external success. Identity-aligned confidence means knowing who you are, what you stand for, and what you're capable of achieving. It means being comfortable with your strengths and limitations without feeling the need to pretend or compensate. It means acting in ways that reflect your genuine personality and values, rather than trying to meet other people's expectations. This type of confidence is unshakable because it doesn't depend on external validation or approval. You know who you are, and you're comfortable with that identity regardless of what others think. This inner security gives you the freedom to communicate authentically and take appropriate risks without being paralyzed by fear of rejection or failure. The confidence algorithm works because it builds genuine self-assurance based on real competence, preparation, evidence, and self-knowledge, rather than superficial techniques or positive thinking. When you systematically develop these elements, you create confidence that withstands pressure, performs under stress, and grows stronger through challenges rather than being diminished by them. Chapter 8. Advanced Influence Techniques. The psychology of getting what you want without force. Influence is not about overpowering people or manipulating them into compliance. It's about understanding human psychology and creating conditions where people naturally want to cooperate with you. The most powerful influence techniques work by aligning with how people already think, feel, and make decisions, rather than fighting against their natural tendencies. The foundation of ethical influence is understanding that people don't resist ideas, they create themselves. When you can guide people to discover conclusions, solutions, or decisions on their own, they feel ownership and commitment rather than resentment or resistance. This requires shifting from telling people what to think to helping them think more effectively about their own situations and goals. The first advanced influence technique is assumption reframing. Most people make unconscious assumptions about what's possible, normal, or appropriate in any given situation. These assumptions create invisible boundaries that limit their thinking and decision-making. By skillfully challenging or reframing these assumptions, you can expand their perception of available options. Assumption reframing works by introducing new perspectives that highlight the arbitrary nature of current limitations. You might ask questions like, what if we didn't have to follow the usual process? Or what would be possible if budget wasn't a constraint? Or how would this look if we were starting from scratch? These questions help people break free from limiting assumptions and consider new possibilities. The key to effective assumption reframing is making it feel natural and collaborative rather than pushy or argumentative. You're not attacking their current thinking, you're helping them expand it. You present alternative perspectives as interesting possibilities to explore, rather than as corrections to their faulty reasoning. The second technique is social proof orchestration. People look to others for guidance about what to think, feel, and do, especially in uncertain situations. By strategically highlighting relevant examples of others who have made similar decisions, you can influence people's perception of what's normal, reasonable, or beneficial. Social proof orchestration requires careful selection of relevant examples that match the person's situation, values, and concerns. The examples should come from people they respect or identify with and demonstrate outcomes they want to achieve. Generic testimonials or irrelevant examples can actually backfire by highlighting differences rather than similarities. You can also create social proof through strategic networking and relationship building. When influential people in someone's network support your position or proposal, it carries much more weight than your direct advocacy. This requires building genuine relationships with key influencers and helping them understand how your proposals benefit their interests as well. The third technique is cognitive reframing. This involves helping people interpret situations, events, or information in ways that support better decision-making. The same facts can be perceived very differently depending on how they're framed and presented. Skilled influence practitioners help people see situations in ways that reveal opportunities rather than just obstacles. Cognitive reframing works by shifting focus from problems to solutions, from costs to benefits, from risks to potential rewards, from what's missing to what's possible. You're not changing the facts, you're helping people interpret those facts in more productive and optimistic ways that enable action rather than paralysis. Effective cognitive reframing requires understanding the other person's current mental framework and gently guiding them toward more empowering interpretations. This means listening carefully to how they describe situations and strategically introducing alternative perspectives that open up new possibilities. The fourth technique is reciprocity activation. People feel psychologically obligated to return favors and reciprocate kindness. This principle can be used ethically by providing genuine value before asking for anything in return. When you help people solve problems, achieve goals, or gain insights, they naturally want to cooperate with your requests. Reciprocity activation works best when the value you provide is unexpected, personalized, and clearly beneficial to the recipient. It should feel like a genuine gift rather than an obvious manipulation tactic. The goal is to create positive feelings and goodwill that naturally lead to cooperation rather than obligation that feels manipulative. You can activate reciprocity through providing useful information, making valuable introductions, offering practical assistance, sharing relevant expertise, or simply giving genuine recognition and appreciation. The key is that your giving should be authentic and focused on their needs, rather than obviously designed to create obligation. The fifth technique is consistency leveraging. People have a strong psychological need to remain consistent with their previous statements, decisions, and public commitments. Once someone takes a position or makes a commitment, they feel internal pressure to act in ways that support that position, even when circumstances change. Consistency leveraging involves helping people connect your proposals to commitments, values, or positions they've already established. If someone has publicly committed to improving customer service, you can frame your proposal as a way to fulfill that commitment. If they've stated certain values, you can show how your request aligns with those values. The key to ethical consistency leveraging is ensuring that the connections you highlight are genuine and beneficial, rather than superficial or manipulative. You're helping people see how your proposal supports their authentic commitments and values, not tricking them into compliance through artificial consistency pressure. The sixth technique is scarcity and urgency creation. People value things more when they perceive them as rare, limited, or time-sensitive. This principle can be used ethically when the scarcity or urgency is genuine and relevant to the person's goals. Creating false scarcity is manipulative and backfires when discovered. Genuine scarcity might include limited availability of opportunities, resources, or timing windows. Real urgency might involve deadlines, consequences, or changing market conditions. The key is to help people understand actual time sensitivity, rather than creating artificial pressure through fake deadlines or false limitations. When highlighting scarcity or urgency, you should also provide clear information about why the limitation exists and what the consequences of delay might be. This helps people make informed decisions rather than feeling pressured into hasty choices they might regret later. The seventh technique is emotional alignment. People make decisions based on emotions, then justify them with logic. Effective influence requires connecting with people's genuine emotions and helping them see how your proposal satisfies their emotional needs and desires, not just their logical requirements. Emotional alignment means understanding what people really care about at a deeper level than their stated rational preferences. What are their fears, hopes, ambitions, and values? How do they want to feel about themselves and their decisions? What emotional outcomes are they trying to achieve or avoid? Once you understand someone's emotional drivers, you can frame your communication in ways that connect with those feelings while still providing solid logical support. You're not manipulating emotions, you're helping people see how your proposal aligns with what they genuinely care about most deeply. These advanced influence techniques work because they align with natural human psychology rather than fighting against it. They help people make better decisions that serve their interests while also achieving your legitimate objectives. When used ethically, they create win-win outcomes that strengthen relationships and build long-term cooperation and trust. Chapter 9. Crisis Communication: How to Stay Powerful When Everything Goes Wrong. Crisis situations reveal who has real communication power and who just appears confident when things are easy. When pressure mounts, emotions run high, and stakes become critical, most people's communication skills collapse. They become reactive, defensive, scattered, or paralyzed. But masters of crisis communication actually become more powerful and influential during difficult times because they know how to maintain composure, clarity, and leadership when others lose control. Crisis communication is not about having all the answers or preventing all problems. It's about maintaining your effectiveness and influence when facing unexpected challenges, uncertainty, and high-stakes pressure. The people who master this skill become the ones others turn to when things go wrong, which creates enormous opportunities for leadership and advancement. The first principle of crisis communication is emotional regulation under pressure. When crisis hits, your first responsibility is managing your own emotional state, because your emotions will either stabilize or destabilize everyone around you. People look to leaders for emotional cues about how serious the situation is and how they should respond. Emotional regulation doesn't mean suppressing emotions or pretending everything is fine. It means processing emotions internally before they leak out in destructive ways. You feel the stress, anxiety, or urgency, but you don't let those feelings control your communication or decision-making. This emotional control gives others confidence that you can handle the situation effectively. Techniques for crisis. Emotional regulation include controlled breathing to maintain physiological calm, strategic pausing before responding to avoid reactive statements, grounding yourself in facts rather than fears, and focusing on solutions rather than dwelling on problems. These practices help you maintain the clear thinking necessary for effective crisis leadership. The second principle is information management and transparency. During crises, people are hungry for information, and they'll create their own explanations if you don't provide clear, accurate updates. This rumor generation often makes situations worse than they actually are, so proactive communication is essential for maintaining control and confidence. Effective crisis information management means providing regular updates even when you don't have complete information. You communicate what you know, what you don't know, what you're doing to find out more, and when you expect to have additional information. This transparency builds trust and prevents the information vacuum that leads to speculation and panic. You should also acknowledge the seriousness of situations without being alarmist or defeatist. People need to understand that you're taking things seriously and responding appropriately. But they also need confidence that the situation is manageable. This balance requires careful word choice and tone management. The third principle is solution-focused communication. Crisis situations naturally generate problem-focused thinking, where people become absorbed in analyzing what went wrong, who's to blame, and how bad things might get. While some problem analysis is necessary, effective crisis communication quickly shifts focus to solution development and action planning. Solution-focused communication means acknowledging problems without dwelling on them, redirecting energy toward constructive action, and maintaining optimism about finding workable solutions. You ask questions like, what can we do now to improve this situation? What resources do we have available? And what would success look like given our current constraints? This approach doesn't mean ignoring real problems or being unrealistically positive. It means channeling mental and emotional energy toward productive problem solving rather than getting stuck in circular problem analysis or blame assignment that doesn't improve outcomes. The fourth principle is stakeholder-specific messaging. Different groups of people affected by a crisis have different concerns, information needs, and decision-making authority. Effective crisis communication involves tailoring your message content timing and delivery method to each stakeholder group's specific situation and requirements. Internal team members need detailed information about immediate action steps, role clarifications, and resource availability. Senior leadership needs strategic perspective, impact assessment, and recommendation options. External partners need relevant updates without confidential details. Customers need reassurance about how the situation affects them and what you're doing to protect their interests. Creating stakeholder-specific messaging requires understanding each group's priorities, concerns, and decision-making processes. You provide enough information for them to feel informed and confident without overwhelming them with irrelevant details or creating unnecessary anxiety about aspects that don't affect them. The fifth principle is decisive leadership communication. Crises require decisions to be made quickly with incomplete information under time pressure. Effective crisis communicators can gather input quickly, synthesize information efficiently, and communicate decisions clearly, even when they're not completely certain about all the implications. Decisive leadership communication involves stating decisions, clearly explaining the reasoning behind them, assigning specific responsibilities with deadlines, and establishing follow-up processes for monitoring results, and making adjustments. You don't wait for perfect information or universal consensus, because delay often makes problems worse. The key is balancing speed with thoroughness. You move quickly enough to address urgent needs, but thoughtfully enough to avoid creating bigger problems through hasty decisions. This requires developing good judgment about when more analysis is needed versus when action is more important than additional planning. The sixth principle is reputation, protection, and recovery. How you communicate during crises significantly impacts your long-term reputation and relationships. People remember how you handled pressure more than they remember the specific problems you faced. This makes crisis communication an opportunity to demonstrate character, competence, and leadership, rather than just a challenge to survive. Reputation protection involves taking appropriate responsibility without unnecessary self-blame, maintaining professional standards even under pressure, and following through on commitments made during crisis periods. You don't promise things you can't deliver, but you do everything possible to fulfill the commitments you make. Recovery communication focuses on learning from the crisis, improving systems and processes to prevent similar problems, and demonstrating that you've grown stronger and more capable as a result of handling the challenge. This positions crises as growth opportunities rather than just problems to overcome. The seventh principle is relationship strengthening through adversity. Crisis situations can either damage relationships through poor communication or strengthen them through effective crisis management. When you handle crises well, people develop deeper trust and respect for your leadership capabilities and character. Relationship strengthening happens when you maintain clear communication, keep commitments made under pressure, show genuine concern for others' welfare, and follow through on promises to improve situations. People who see you perform well under pressure become stronger advocates and supporters in the future. You can also use crisis situations to demonstrate values and priorities that might not be visible during normal operations. How you treat people when resources are scarce, what principles you maintain under pressure, and how you balance competing interests during difficult times all reveal character that builds long-term trust and influence. Crisis communication mastery transforms you from someone who struggles during difficult periods to someone who actually gains influence and respect through effective crisis leadership. Instead of avoiding challenging situations, you become the person others seek out when they need strong, steady leadership during uncertain times. Chapter 10. Building communication systems that create lasting influence. Most people approach communication as a series of isolated interactions without any systematic strategy for building cumulative influence over time. They have good conversations and bad conversations, random successes and unexpected failures, but no coherent system for consistently developing their communication power and expanding their influence. Building lasting influence requires systematic approaches that compound over time, rather than relying on individual moments of brilliance. The foundation of systematic communication influence is understanding that every interaction either builds or erodes your reputation for competence, trustworthiness, and leadership. People form impressions about your communication abilities based on patterns they observe over time, not just single conversations. This means you need consistent standards and approaches that reinforce positive perceptions through multiple touchpoints. The first element of communication systems is message consistency across contexts. Your core messages about your capabilities, values, priorities, and expertise should remain consistent, whether you're speaking in formal presentations, casual conversations, written communications, or crisis situations. This consistency helps people develop clear, accurate impressions of who you are and what you stand for. Message consistency doesn't mean being rigid or robotic in your communication. It means having clear, authentic core themes that appear reliably across different formats and situations. When people interact with you multiple times, they should get reinforcing evidence about your key strengths and values rather than confusing mixed signals that make you hard to categorize or remember. You develop message consistency by identifying your core professional identity and value proposition, then finding natural ways to reinforce these themes in diverse communication situations. This requires conscious preparation and practice, but becomes more natural over time as you develop communication habits that automatically reinforce your desired reputation. The second element is relationship mapping and strategic networking. Influence flows through relationships, and building systematic influence requires understanding your relationship ecosystem and developing strategic approaches for strengthening key connections over time. This means identifying who influences whom in your professional environment and building authentic relationships with those key connectors. Relationship mapping involves analyzing formal and informal power structures, identifying decision-makers and influencers, understanding relationship dynamics between key players, and recognizing opportunities for adding value to important relationships. This analysis helps you prioritize relationship-building efforts and develop appropriate strategies for different types of connections. Strategic networking goes beyond collecting contacts to focus on creating genuine mutual value with people who can expand your influence and opportunities. This requires understanding others' goals, challenges, and priorities, then finding authentic ways to help them achieve their objectives while building stronger professional relationships. The third element is expertise positioning and thought leadership development. People develop lasting influence by becoming known for specific expertise and insights that others find valuable. This requires consistently developing your knowledge and capabilities in chosen areas, then systematically sharing those insights through multiple communication channels. Expertise positioning involves identifying areas where you can develop distinctive competence, then consistently communicating insights and perspectives that demonstrate that expertise. This might include industry knowledge, technical skills, problem-solving, approaches, leadership philosophies, or relationship-building capabilities that others recognize as valuable. Thought leadership development requires regularly creating and sharing content that showcases your expertise and provides value to others. This might include presentations, articles, social media posts, internal reports, strategic recommendations, or informal mentoring that helps others learn from your knowledge and experience. The fourth element is feedback systems and continuous improvement. Systematic influence building requires regular feedback about your communication effectiveness and consistent efforts to improve your skills and approaches. Most people receive very little direct feedback about their communication and therefore miss opportunities to enhance their influence. Effective feedback systems include seeking input from trusted colleagues and mentors, tracking outcomes from important communications, observing others' responses and reactions to your messages, and regularly assessing your progress toward influence and relationship goals. This feedback helps you identify what's working well and what needs adjustment. Continuous improvement means treating communication as a skill that can always be enhanced rather than a fixed ability. You study effective communicators, analyze successful interactions, practice new techniques, and experiment with different approaches to expand your communication repertoire and effectiveness. The fifth element is platform development and visibility creation. Lasting influence requires that people know about your capabilities and expertise, which means systematically creating visibility for your ideas, contributions, and achievements. This involves identifying appropriate platforms and opportunities to showcase your communication skills and thought leadership. Platform development might include volunteering for high-visibility projects, seeking speaking opportunities, writing for company publications, participating in industry events, joining professional organizations, or taking leadership roles in important initiatives. These platforms give you opportunities to demonstrate your communication capabilities to broader audiences. Visibility creation also requires documenting and sharing your achievements and insights, rather than assuming that good work will automatically be recognized. This means strategically communicating about your successes, helping others understand your contributions, and creating tangible evidence of your expertise and impact. The sixth element is succession planning and mentorship systems. Lasting influence involves developing others who can extend and amplify your impact over time. By mentoring and developing other effective communicators, you create a network of people who understand and support your approaches and can advocate for your ideas even when you're not present. Mentorship systems involve identifying high-potential individuals who can benefit from your guidance, then systematically helping them develop their communication skills and advance their careers. This creates loyalty and advocacy, while also establishing your reputation as someone who develops talent and builds strong teams. Succession planning means preparing others to carry forward your ideas and approaches, even if you move to different roles or organizations. This might involve training team members, documenting your methods, creating process improvements, or developing organizational capabilities that outlast your direct involvement. The seventh element is legacy building and institutional influence. The highest level of communication influence involves creating changes in how organizations or industries think and operate. This requires developing approaches that become embedded in systems, processes, and cultures rather than just influencing individual decisions or relationships. Legacy building involves identifying opportunities to improve how communication happens within your organization or industry, then developing and implementing systematic improvements that benefit multiple people over extended periods. This might include training programs, communication standards, process improvements, or cultural changes that enhance effectiveness. Institutional influence means becoming someone whose ideas and approaches shape how others think about communication, leadership, or problem-solving. This level of influence requires consistent excellence over extended periods, but creates impact that continues long after individual interactions or relationships. Building communication systems that create lasting influence transforms you from someone who has occasional communication successes to someone who systematically expands their impact and reputation over time. These systems ensure that your influence grows consistently rather than fluctuating randomly based on individual interactions or circumstances. Chapter 11. The Charisma Formula: Manufacturing Magnetic Presence. On command. Charisma is not a mysterious quality that some people are born with and others lack forever. It's a specific combination of behaviors, attitudes, and communication patterns that can be learned, developed, and deployed strategically. The most charismatic people you know became that way through understanding and practicing specific techniques, not through genetic luck or natural talent. The foundation of charisma is making other people feel important, valued, and understood when they interact with you. Charismatic people have mastered the art of focusing their attention and energy on others in ways that create powerful, positive emotions. This isn't manipulation or fake interest, it's genuine engagement combined with specific skills that amplify the impact of that engagement. Most people think charisma is about being entertaining, charming, or the center of attention, but real charisma is about making others feel like they're the center of attention when you're with them. Charismatic people have the rare ability to make each person they interact with feel like the most important person in the room at that moment. The first element of the charisma formula is presence intensity. This means giving your complete, undivided attention to whoever you're communicating with, regardless of distractions, competing priorities, or other interesting people nearby. Most people give partial attention while thinking about other things, checking devices, or scanning the room for more important conversations. Presence intensity requires mental discipline to focus completely on the current interaction. You're not thinking about your next meeting, your phone notifications, or other people you want to talk to. Your entire mental and emotional energy is directed toward understanding and engaging with the person in front of you. This level of attention is rare in modern society where everyone is constantly distracted and multitasking. When someone experiences your complete focused attention, it creates a powerful, positive emotion that they associate with you. They feel heard, understood, and valued in ways that most interactions don't provide. The second element is emotional attunement. Charismatic people are masters at reading and responding to other people's emotional states. They can sense when someone is excited, nervous, proud, frustrated, or uncertain, and they adjust their communication style to match and support those emotions appropriately. Emotional attunement involves paying attention to subtle cues like tone of voice, body language, energy level, and word choice that reveal how someone is feeling beyond what they're explicitly saying. You're reading between the lines to understand their emotional experience, not just their factual communication. Once you understand someone's emotional state, you can respond in ways that validate and support their feelings. If they're excited about something, you match their enthusiasm. If they're worried about a challenge, you acknowledge their concern and offer appropriate support. If they're proud of an achievement, you celebrate with them genuinely. The third element is curiosity amplification. Charismatic people ask better questions and show genuine interest in learning about others. They're not just waiting for their turn to talk or looking for opportunities to share their own stories. They're authentically curious about other people's experiences, perspectives, and insights. Curiosity amplification means asking follow-up questions that show you're really listening and want to understand more deeply. Instead of surface-level small talk, you probe into what makes people passionate, what challenges they're facing, what they're learning, and what they're excited about. These deeper questions create more meaningful connections. The key is that your curiosity must be genuine, not strategic. People can sense when you're asking questions just to appear interested versus when you're actually fascinated by their answers. Real curiosity creates real connection, while fake interest feels manipulative and hollow. The fourth element is energy management and contagion. Charismatic people understand that energy is contagious, and they consciously manage their energy level to create positive emotional states in others. They bring appropriate energy to different situations, whether that's calm, confidence in crisis moments, enthusiasm for new projects, or focused intensity for important discussions. Energy management requires self-awareness about your current emotional and physical state, combined with the ability to consciously adjust your energy to serve the situation and the people you're with. If you're tired or stressed, you don't let that negative energy infect your interactions. If the situation calls for high energy, you find ways to generate genuine enthusiasm. Energy contagion works because humans unconsciously mirror the emotional states of people around them, especially people they respect or admire. When you consistently bring positive, appropriate energy to interactions, people start feeling better when they're around you, which makes them want to spend more time with you. The fifth element is storytelling mastery. Charismatic people are compelling storytellers who can make ordinary experiences interesting and meaningful. They understand how to structure narratives, create emotional engagement, and use stories to illustrate points, connect with others, and create memorable shared experiences. Effective storytelling involves selecting relevant details that create vivid mental pictures, using appropriate pacing to build tension and interest, including emotional content that helps listeners connect with the experience, and ending easing with insights or lessons that add value beyond entertainment. Charismatic storytelling isn't about having the most interesting life or most dramatic experiences. It's about finding the universal human elements in ordinary situations and presenting them in ways that help others see new perspectives or feel understood in their own similar experiences. The sixth element is vulnerability calibration. Charismatic people share appropriate personal information that helps others feel connected to them without oversharing or making others uncomfortable. They understand the difference between strategic vulnerability that builds connection and emotional dumping that creates awkwardness. Strategic vulnerability means sharing challenges, struggles, or uncertainties that others can relate to while maintaining your overall competence and strength. You might share a professional challenge you're navigating, a skill you're working to develop, or a lesson you learned from a mistake. The key is that your vulnerability should serve the relationship and the conversation, not just your need for attention or emotional support. You're sharing personal information to help others feel less alone in their own challenges, or to demonstrate that growth and learning are ongoing processes for everyone. The seventh element is positive assumption and benefit of the doubt. Charismatic people consistently assume positive intentions and give others the benefit of the doubt rather than being suspicious, cynical, or quick to judge. This creates psychological safety that allows others to be more open, authentic, and creative in their interactions. Positive assumption means interpreting ambiguous behavior in the most charitable way possible, giving people credit for good intentions, even when their actions don't work out perfectly, and focusing on people's strengths, potential rather than their weaknesses and limitations. This doesn't mean being naive or ignoring red flags when they appear. It means starting from a position of trust and respect, rather than requiring people to prove themselves worthy of positive treatment. This approach brings out the best in others because people tend to live up to the expectations others have of them. The eighth element is celebration and recognition. Charismatic people are generous with praise, recognition, and celebration of others' achievements. They notice when people do good work, overcome challenges, or demonstrate positive qualities, and they express genuine appreciation for those accomplishments. Effective recognition is specific timely, and focused on the impact or quality of what someone did rather than generic praise. Instead of saying "good job," you explain specifically what was valuable about their contribution and why it mattered. This shows that you were paying attention and genuinely value their efforts. Charismatic people also celebrate others' successes without feeling competitive or diminished. They understand that recognizing others' achievements doesn't reduce their own value, and that generous recognition actually increases their own influence and likability. The charisma formula works because it addresses fundamental human needs for attention, understanding, recognition, and connection. When you consistently make others feel valued and important through your communication style, you become someone people want to be around, work with, and support. This creates opportunities, influence, and relationships that compound over time into genuine personal and professional power. Chapter 12. Difficult Conversations: How to Navigate Conflict Without Losing Respect. Most people avoid difficult conversations until problems become crises, or they approach them so poorly that they damage relationships and make situations worse. The ability to navigate challenging discussions skillfully is one of the most valuable communication competencies you can develop, because it transforms potential relationship damage into relationship strengthening and turns conflicts into collaborations. Difficult conversations are not inherently bad or destructive. They become destructive when they're handled poorly. When approached with the right mindset, preparation, and techniques, challenging discussions can actually build trust, deepen relationships, and create better outcomes for everyone involved. The key is learning to have these conversations in ways that preserve dignity, maintain respect, and focus on solutions rather than blame. The foundation of effective, difficult conversations is shifting from adversarial thinking to collaborative problem-solving. Most people approach conflict as a battle where someone wins and someone loses. But this mindset guarantees relationship damage, regardless of the immediate outcome. Collaborative thinking focuses on understanding different perspectives and finding solutions that address everyone's legitimate needs. The first principle of difficult conversation mastery is preparation and emotional regulation. Before engaging in any challenging discussion, you need to clarify your objectives, manage your emotional state, and develop a strategy for keeping the conversation productive. Most difficult conversations fail because people enter them emotionally reactive and without clear goals. Preparation involves identifying what outcome you actually want from the conversation, not just what you want to say or prove. Are you trying to solve a specific problem, change someone's behavior, clarify expectations, repair a relationship, or prevent future issues? Having clear objectives helps you stay focused on productive outcomes rather than getting sidetracked by emotions or blame. Emotional regulation requires processing your feelings about the situation before the conversation so they don't leak out in destructive ways during the discussion. If you're angry, hurt, frustrated, or disappointed, you need to acknowledge those emotions and develop strategies for managing them during the conversation. The second principle is opening with intention and respect. How you start a difficult conversation largely determines how it will unfold. Aggressive, accusatory, or emotional openings immediately trigger defensiveness and conflict escalation. Respectful, intentional openings create space for productive dialogue, even about challenging topics. Effective openings acknowledge the difficulty of the conversation, express your positive intentions, and invite collaboration. You might say something like, "I'd like to discuss something that's been concerning me, and I hope we can work together to find a good solution." Or, "I value our relationship and want to address an issue that's been affecting our work together." The key is demonstrating that you see the other person as a collaborator in solving a problem rather than as an opponent to defeat. This framing encourages cooperation rather than defensiveness and sets the stage for productive problem solving. The third principle is facts versus interpretations. Separation. Most difficult conversations get derailed because people present their interpretations, opinions, or assumptions as if they were facts. This creates unnecessary argument about subjective perspectives rather than focusing on objective information and workable solutions. Facts are observable, verifiable information that both parties can agree on. Interpretations are your opinions, assumptions, or conclusions about what those facts mean. Separating these elements allows you to discuss objective information without immediately triggering disagreement about subjective interpretations. For example, saying you don't respect deadlines is an interpretation that will likely trigger defensiveness. Saying the project was submitted 2 days after the agreed deadline is a fact that can be discussed objectively. Once you establish the facts, you can explore different interpretations and solutions without getting stuck in argument about subjective perspectives. The fourth principle is listening for understanding, not rebuttal. Most people listen to difficult conversations primarily to find flaws in the other person's reasoning or opportunities to present their counter-arguments. This defensive listening prevents real understanding and escalates conflict because people feel unheard and dismissed. Listening for understanding means genuinely trying to comprehend the other person's perspective, concerns, and needs, even when you disagree with their conclusions or approaches. You're seeking to understand their reasoning, their constraints, and their desired outcomes before focusing on your own position. This type of listening often reveals information that changes your understanding of the situation and opens up solution possibilities that weren't apparent when you were focused only on defending your own perspective. Understanding doesn't require agreement, but it creates foundation for finding mutually acceptable solutions. The fifth principle is acknowledging valid points and shared concerns. Even in conflicts, there are usually some areas of agreement or shared concern that can serve as foundation for problem solving. Acknowledging these commonalities helps de-escalate tension and creates collaborative momentum. Valid point acknowledgement means recognizing when the other person raises legitimate concerns or accurate observations, even if you disagree with their overall position or proposed solutions. This shows intellectual honesty and reduces their need to keep arguing points you've already accepted. Shared concern identification involves finding areas where you both want similar outcomes, even if you disagree about methods or priorities. You might both want project success, customer satisfaction, team harmony, or efficient processes, even while disagreeing about specific approaches. The sixth principle is solution-focused redirection. Difficult conversations can easily become stuck in problem analysis, blame assignment, or emotional venting that doesn't improve anything. Effective conversation management involves acknowledging problems and emotions, but consistently redirecting energy towards solution development and action planning. Solution-focused questions include: what would need to change for this to work better? What options do we have for addressing this concern? What would success look like from both our perspectives? And what specific steps could we take to improve this situation? These questions move the conversation from complaint to collaboration. The key is not to rush to solutions before problems are fully understood, but to prevent getting stuck in endless problem discussion without moving toward resolution. You want enough problem analysis to understand what needs to be solved, but not so much that the conversation becomes dominated by negativity and blame. The seventh principle is agreement documentation and follow-through. Many difficult conversations end with verbal agreements that are later forgotten, misremembered, or interpreted differently by different parties. Effective conversation closure includes confirming what was agreed to, establishing specific next steps, and creating accountability for follow-through. Agreement documentation doesn't have to be formal, but it should include clear understanding of what each person committed to do, specific timelines for action, and planned follow-up to assess progress. This prevents the same issues from resurfacing due to unclear or unfulfilled agreements. Follow-through is crucial because broken commitments from difficult conversations often create worse relationship damage than the original problems. When you make agreements during challenging discussions, you must prioritize fulfilling those commitments to demonstrate that the conversation led to real positive change. Mastering difficult conversations transforms you from someone who avoids conflict until it becomes destructive to someone who can address problems early and constructively. This skill prevents small issues from becoming major crises, builds stronger relationships through effective problem-solving, and establishes your reputation as someone who can handle challenging situations with grace and effectiveness. Chapter 13. Digital Communication Mastery Influence in the Virtual World. The digital revolution has fundamentally changed how we communicate. But most people are still using analog communication strategies in digital environments. This mismatch between old approaches and new mediums severely limits their influence and effectiveness. Mastering digital communication requires understanding how virtual interactions differ from face-to-face communication and adapting your strategies accordingly. Digital communication removes many of the non-verbal cues that drive influence in person. Tone of voice, body language, facial expressions, energy levels, and physical presence are either completely absent or significantly diminished in digital formats. This means you must become more skilled at creating influence through word choice, message structure, timing, and strategic use of available digital tools. The absence of immediate feedback also changes digital communication dynamics. In face-to-face conversations, you can read reactions in real time and adjust your approach instantly. Digital communication often involves delayed responses, which means you must anticipate reactions and craft messages that work effectively without real-time calibration. The first principle of digital communication mastery is platform optimization. Different digital platforms have different communication norms, user expectations, and algorithmic behaviors that affect how your messages are received and distributed. What works on email doesn't work on social media. What works in video calls doesn't work in text messages. And what works in formal digital presentations doesn't work in casual online interactions. Platform optimization requires understanding the specific characteristics of each digital environment and adapting your communication style to match user expectations while still maintaining your authentic voice and achieving your influence objectives. This isn't about becoming a different person on different platforms. It's about emphasizing different aspects of your communication style to match platform norms. Email communication requires clear subject lines, structured content that's easy to scan, specific action requests with deadlines, and appropriate formality levels based on your relationship with recipients. Social media communication requires more casual tone, visual elements that support your message, strategic use of hashtags, and timing that aligns with when your audience is most active. The second principle is attention capture and retention. Digital environments are extremely competitive for attention, with people constantly bombarded by messages, notifications, and competing content. Your digital communication must be designed to break through this noise and hold attention long enough to deliver your message effectively. Attention capture starts with compelling openings that immediately signal value, relevance, or urgency. This might include intriguing questions, surprising statistics, relevant stories, or clear statements of benefit. You have seconds to convince someone that your message is worth their time and attention. Attention retention requires strategic formatting that makes your content easy to consume even when people are distracted or multitasking. This includes short paragraphs, bullet points, bold text to highlight key points, strategic white space, and logical flow that allows people to follow your reasoning even when skimming. The third principle is emotional connection without physical presence. Creating emotional engagement through digital communication requires more intentional effort because you can't rely on physical charisma, vocal tone, or personal presence to create connection. You must generate emotional engagement primarily through your content strategy and word choice. Emotional connection in digital formats comes from understanding and addressing your audience's concerns, aspirations, fears, and desires through your messaging. You need to demonstrate that you understand their situation and genuinely care about helping them achieve their goals or solve their problems. Personal storytelling becomes even more important in digital communication because stories create emotional engagement and help people feel connected to you as a person rather than just a source of information. Strategic vulnerability and authentic sharing help humanize your digital presence and create the personal connection that builds influence. The fourth principle is credibility establishment and social proof integration. Digital environments make it easy for people to research your background, verify your claims, and check your reputation before deciding whether to trust your communication. This makes credibility establishment crucial for digital influence. Digital credibility comes from consistent, high-quality content that demonstrates expertise, professional presentation, that reflects attention to detail, social proof through testimonials, recommendations, and engagement metrics, and transparent, authentic communication that builds trust over time. You can integrate social proof into digital communication through strategic sharing of testimonials, case studies, achievement metrics, and endorsements from credible sources. But this social proof must feel natural and relevant rather than forced or boastful. The fifth principle is strategic timing and frequency optimization. Digital communication timing affects whether your messages are seen, read, and acted upon. Different audiences have different online behavior patterns, and different platforms have optimal posting times that affect message, visibility, and engagement. Timing optimization requires understanding when your specific audience is most likely to be online and receptive to your type of message. This varies by industry role, time zone, and platform, but data analysis can reveal patterns that improve your communication effectiveness. Frequency optimization involves finding the right balance between staying visible and relevant without becoming annoying or overwhelming. Too little communication and people forget about you too much, and they start ignoring or unsubscribing from your messages. The sixth principle is multimedia integration and visual communication. Digital platforms increasingly favor visual content over text-only communication. This means developing skills in creating and using images, videos, graphics, and other visual elements that support and enhance your written communication. Visual communication doesn't require professional design skills, but it does require understanding how to use visual elements strategically to support your message objectives. This might include infographics that simplify complex information, videos that demonstrate concepts, photos that create emotional connection, or charts that support data-driven arguments. The key is that visual elements should enhance rather than distract from your core message. They should serve specific communication purposes not just make your content look more attractive. The seventh principle is engagement cultivation and community building. Digital communication is increasingly interactive, with audiences expecting opportunities to respond, comment, and engage rather than just passively consuming content. Building digital influence requires creating opportunities for meaningful engagement that builds relationships over time. Engagement cultivation involves asking questions that encourage responses, sharing content that invites discussion, responding thoughtfully to comments and messages, and creating opportunities for your audience to contribute value rather than just receiving it from you. Community building takes engagement further by creating ongoing relationships between audience members, not just between you and individual followers. This might involve facilitating introductions, encouraging collaboration among your network, or creating forums where people with shared interests can connect and support each other. Digital communication mastery transforms your online presence from a static information source to a dynamic influence platform that builds relationships, creates opportunities, and establishes your expertise across multiple digital environments. This expanded digital influence increasingly translates into real-world opportunities and offline relationship building as digital and physical communication become more integrated. Chapter 14. The Mastery Mindset. Becoming a lifelong student of human psychology. Communication mastery is not a destination you reach and then maintain effortlessly. It's an ongoing journey of learning, observation, practice, and refinement. The most powerful communicators never stop studying human psychology, observing social dynamics, and experimenting with new approaches because they understand that both communication contexts and human behavior are constantly evolving. The mastery mindset separates people who plateau at basic competence from those who continue developing extraordinary influence throughout their careers. This mindset involves treating every interaction as a learning opportunity, approaching communication challenges with curiosity rather than frustration, and systematically studying what works and what doesn't in your specific contexts and relationships. Most people think communication improvement happens through formal training courses or workshops, but real mastery comes from developing sophisticated observation skills and consistently analyzing your communication experiences. You become your own communication laboratory, constantly testing hypotheses and refining your approaches based on real-world feedback. The first element of the mastery mindset is pattern recognition development. Human behavior follows predictable patterns, and master communicators become expert at recognizing these patterns quickly and adapting their approach accordingly. This pattern recognition allows them to read situations, accurately predict likely responses, and choose communication strategies that are most likely to achieve their objectives. Pattern recognition requires systematic observation of communication dynamics across multiple contexts, relationships, and situations. You start noticing how different personality types respond to different communication approaches, how cultural backgrounds affect communication preferences, how stress levels change people's receptivity to different messages, and how power dynamics influence conversation flow. You develop pattern recognition by paying attention to multiple data points simultaneously. You observe verbal responses, but also body language, energy changes, engagement levels, and follow-up behaviors. You notice not just what people say, but how they say it when they choose to speak, and how their communication changes under different circumstances. The second element is feedback seeking and integration. Master communicators actively seek feedback about their communication effectiveness from multiple sources and use that feedback to continuously improve their approaches. They don't assume they know how they're being perceived or what impact their communication is having. Effective feedback seeking involves asking specific questions about communication effectiveness rather than general questions about performance. You might ask how clear your explanation was, whether your presentation style matched the audience's preferences, what questions weren't addressed, or how your communication could be more helpful next time. You also develop skills in reading nonverbal feedback during conversations and adjusting your approach in real time based on subtle cues about engagement, confusion, resistance, or enthusiasm. This dynamic adjustment capability separates good communicators from great ones. The third element is experimentation and calculated risk-taking. Communication mastery requires trying new approaches, testing different strategies, and occasionally failing in order to discover what's possible beyond your current comfort zone. Safe, predictable communication leads to safe, predictable results, while breakthrough influence requires strategic experimentation. Effective experimentation involves trying new approaches in low-stakes situations first, then gradually applying successful techniques in higher-stakes contexts. You might experiment with different storytelling styles in casual conversations before using them in important presentations, or test new influence techniques with supportive colleagues before using them with challenging stakeholders. The key is that your experimentation should be thoughtful and strategic rather than random or reckless. You're testing specific hypotheses about what might work better, not just trying things randomly to see what happens. The fourth element is cross-domain learning and application. Communication insights come from many fields beyond traditional communication training, including psychology, neuroscience, sociology, anthropology, theater sales, negotiation therapy, and leadership development. Master communicators study these diverse fields and adapt relevant insights to their communication challenges. Cross-domain learning might involve studying how therapists build rapport and applying those techniques to business relationships, studying how entertainers hold audience attention and using those approaches in presentations, or studying how negotiators handle resistance and adapting those strategies for difficult conversations. The key is being able to abstract principles from one context and apply them appropriately in different contexts. This requires understanding the underlying psychology behind various techniques rather than just copying surface-level behaviors. The fifth element is systematic skill development and deliberate practice. Communication mastery requires moving beyond casual practice to deliberate practice that focuses on specific weaknesses and pushes your abilities beyond their current limits. This type of practice is more challenging than comfortable repetition, but creates much faster improvement. Deliberate practice involves identifying specific aspects of communication that need improvement, setting up practice scenarios that challenge those specific skills, getting feedback on your performance, and making adjustments based on that feedback. This might involve recording yourself presenting and analyzing your performance, practicing difficult conversations with trusted colleagues, or seeking out challenging communication situations that stretch your abilities. You also develop supporting skills that enhance your communication effectiveness, such as emotional regulation skills that help you stay calm under pressure, analytical skills that help you understand complex situations, or creative skills that help you find new ways to explain difficult concepts. The sixth element is mental model development and framework creation. Master communicators develop sophisticated mental models for understanding communication dynamics and create personal frameworks for approaching different types of communication challenges. These models and frameworks help them process complex situations quickly and choose effective strategies efficiently. Mental models might include frameworks for reading group dynamics during meetings, systems for preparing for different types of presentations, or decision trees for handling various types of conflict. These tools help you move from intuitive communication to strategic communication based on proven principles and reliable processes. You develop these models by studying successful communication examples, analyzing your own successes and failures, and creating systematic approaches for handling recurring communication challenges. Over time, these frameworks become automatic and allow you to handle complex communication situations with greater confidence and effectiveness. The seventh element is teaching and knowledge transfer. One of the most effective ways to deepen your communication mastery is teaching others what you've learned. Teaching forces you to organize your knowledge more clearly, identify gaps in your understanding, and develop better explanations for complex concepts. Teaching opportunities might include formal training sessions, informal mentoring, peer coaching, or simply helping colleagues improve their communication skills. These experiences help you understand communication principles more deeply, while also building your reputation as someone with valuable expertise to share. Knowledge transfer also involves documenting your learning and creating systems that allow others to benefit from your communication insights. This might include writing about communication principles, creating training materials, or developing processes that help your team or organization communicate more effectively. The mastery mindset transforms communication from a basic skill you use occasionally to a sophisticated expertise that you develop continuously throughout your career. This commitment to ongoing learning and improvement creates compounding returns where your communication effectiveness increases dramatically over time rather than plateauing at basic competence. Chapter 15. Your Communication Revolution: Implementing Everything and Dominating Every Room. Everything you've learned in this audiobook becomes worthless unless you implement it systematically and consistently. Most people consume communication training and then go back to their old habits within weeks because they don't have a clear plan for turning knowledge into automatic behavior. This final chapter gives you a systematic approach for implementing these principles and transforming yourself into someone who dominates every communication situation. The implementation process requires more than just trying to remember techniques during conversations. Real transformation happens when these principles become so deeply ingrained that you use them automatically without conscious effort. This level of integration requires systematic practice, structured feedback, and consistent refinement over months, not days or weeks. Your communication revolution starts with honest assessment of your current abilities and clear vision of where you want to be. Most people overestimate their communication skills and underestimate the effort required for real improvement. This gap between perception and reality prevents them from taking the systematic approach necessary for dramatic improvement. The first step is comprehensive skill assessment across all the areas covered in this audiobook. Rate yourself honestly on first impression, creation, authority, projection, persuasion abilities, crisis communication skills, charisma development, and relationship-building capabilities. Identify your strongest areas and your biggest weaknesses so you can prioritize your improvement efforts strategically. This assessment should include feedback from trusted colleagues, friends, and family members who have observed your communication in different contexts. Their perspectives often reveal blind spots that you can't see yourself, and help you understand how others actually perceive your communication style and effectiveness. The second step is implementation, prioritization, and sequencing. You can't improve everything simultaneously, so you need to identify which improvements will create the biggest impact on your specific goals and circumstances. Consider your career objectives, relationship needs, and immediate challenges when deciding which communication skills to develop first. Start with foundational skills that support everything else before moving to advanced techniques. Emotional regulation and basic confidence are prerequisites for effective influence and persuasion. Clear thinking and message organization support both formal presentations and casual conversations. These fundamental capabilities make everything else easier and more effective. The third step is structured practice design and execution. Improvement requires deliberate practice, not just casual effort during normal conversations. This means creating specific practice scenarios that challenge your abilities, provide feedback opportunities, and push you beyond your comfort zone in controlled environments. Practice scenarios might include recording yourself presenting and analyzing your performance role-playing, difficult conversations with trusted partners, practicing influence techniques in low-stakes situations, or joining groups like Toastmasters that provide structured feedback on communication skills. The key is that practice should be more challenging than your normal communication situations, so that real conversations feel easier rather than harder. You're building communication muscles through progressive resistance training, not just casual exercise. The fourth step is feedback system establishment and use. You need reliable ways to assess your progress and identify areas that need continued work. This requires both formal feedback mechanisms and informal observation skills that help you learn from every communication experience. Formal feedback might include regular check-ins with mentors or coaches, structured assessment from colleagues or supervisors, participation in communication training programs, or video recording, and analysis of important presentations or meetings. Informal feedback comes from developing sensitivity to how people respond to your communication. You learn to read engagement levels, notice when people seem confused or resistant, and observe whether your communication achieves the outcomes you intended. This real-time feedback helps you adjust your approach continuously. The fifth step is habit formation and automatic behavior development. The goal is not just to know communication techniques, but to use them automatically without conscious effort. This requires consistent repetition until new communication patterns become your default responses, rather than special techniques you have to remember to use. Habit formation works best when you focus on one specific behavior at a time until it becomes automatic before adding new behaviors. You might spend weeks focusing just on maintaining better eye contact before adding strategic pause techniques, or work on emotional regulation before practicing advanced influence methods. The key is consistent, daily practice rather than intensive occasional effort. Small daily improvements compound over months into dramatic transformations, while sporadic, intense practice sessions create temporary improvement that fades quickly. The sixth step is real-world application and progressive challenge. Once you've developed basic competence through practice scenarios, you need to apply your new skills in increasingly challenging real-world situations. This might mean volunteering for presentations, taking leadership roles in difficult projects, or initiating important conversations you've been avoiding. Progressive challenge means gradually increasing the stakes and difficulty of your communication situations as your skills improve. You start with low-risk situations where mistakes won't have serious consequences, and gradually work up to high-stakes communications where your skills can create significant opportunities or outcomes. The seventh step is continuous refinement and advanced development. Communication mastery is a lifelong journey, not a one-time achievement. Even after you've transformed your basic communication effectiveness, you can continue developing more sophisticated capabilities that create even greater influence and impact. Advanced development might include studying specialized influence techniques, developing expertise in specific communication contexts like negotiations or crisis management, or building thought leadership platforms that establish your reputation as a communication expert. The eighth step is teaching and knowledge sharing. One of the most powerful ways to solidify your communication mastery is helping others develop their skills. Teaching forces you to understand principles more deeply, provides additional practice opportunities, and builds your reputation as someone with valuable expertise. Teaching opportunities exist everywhere, from informal mentoring of colleagues to formal training responsibilities. Every time you help someone else communicate more effectively, you reinforce your own learning while building relationships and establishing your expertise. Your communication revolution culminates when these skills become so natural and automatic that you don't think about them consciously during conversations. You simply communicate powerfully, effectively, and influentially because that's who you've become, not because you're trying to use specific techniques. This transformation takes time, effort, and consistent practice, but the results are extraordinary. You become someone who commands respect, influences decisions, builds strong relationships, and achieves goals through the power of strategic communication. Every conversation becomes an opportunity to demonstrate your capabilities, create value, and build the relationships and reputation that support your long-term success. The techniques in this audiobook have the power to transform not just how you communicate, but how others perceive you, what opportunities come your way, and what you're able to achieve throughout your career and life. But only if you implement them systematically, consistently, and with the commitment to continuous improvement that separates masters from amateurs. Your communication revolution starts now with your very next conversation. The only question is whether you'll commit to the process that creates extraordinary results or settle for the modest improvements that come from casual effort. The choice is yours, and it will determine whether you join the ranks of truly powerful communicators or remain among the masses who struggle to be heard, respected, and influential.